meeting for February 13, 2019. First item this evening is roll call. Ms. Iker.
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker. Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Second item is review of agenda by the board.
Madam Mayor, I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Bennett, approving the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved as presented. So our item 3 is we will step down into the chambers to join the others. We have the DDA board here this evening, and we have folks from the American Legion who have joined us, as well as a few folks from the community, and we will join them for the presentation by Brinkman. We can't turn this around, can we? Because I'm talking to everybody.
What's that? The mic this way.
If you want to look at your time, but it's up to you because you might need to see.
Yeah, I need to see that, but I'm feeling kind of lonely.
Okay. So with that, we're going to let Mr. Jay Hardy start us off with the presentation.
Well, we'll see how we can do this side by side here. Well, good evening, Mayor, DDA board members, town board members. Appreciate the opportunity to present this project for your consideration. You know, it's been a long road getting to where we are today. It's been almost 2 years. I'll go through quick a background and then also what we're proposing. But as a resident here of Windsor, it's certainly a neat opportunity for me personally to be able to work in our community. I don't always get the opportunity to do that. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. What we're going to present tonight is what I'm going to call the backlot development. Based on the background that we went through, we're almost 2 years from when this presentation or the RFP was put together and presented by the town and the DDA. And then we submitted about a month later, and then about a month after that we were selected by a group that consisted of the town board members as well as the DDA board members. The RFP objectives that are outlined here is to create a mixed-use destination, leverage proximity to the Windsor Lake, connecting to the downtown area, increase the vitality of the community's core, collaborative parking solutions, and then collaboration with the American Legion. When we move on to our original proposal was really a response to the 3-block development. So I'm going to reference this initially on our left. We see what I'm going to reference through the presentation, the Town Public Works block, the middle block, which is the Birch block, which is now owned by the Downtown Development Authority, and then the DDA parcel, which has been owned by the DDA for some time. It's a unique opportunity for me as a former DDA director in Fort Collins for about 7 years to be able to come back into the downtowns. Really in every downtown in northern Colorado we've had a chance to work, as well as some in the Denver area. So what we're proposing is really a 2-phase project, and I want to talk specifically about why it's 2 phases. We have an opportunity to, one of the big issues is really the opportunity to relocate the Legion. We've had a series of meetings with them, and as I'll talk through the opportunity that's there, we have a very tight timeline on that. And so rather than spending a lot of time focusing on the entire thing, we broke it into 2 phases. I'll go through each phase and the timing of what we think each phase will be. But really, this is the most important part in terms of the relative timing. So the mechanics of it is that we would go and purchase the old American Legion facility. So that's under contract. We met probably more times than any of us want to admit with the Legion, and did a couple presentations. And then we would also, we're under contract to purchase and redevelop the ground, or the building at 213 and 215 4th Street. And then that would be the future home. The birch block or the middle block would become temporary parking. So the current lot, which is the DDA block that is under, it's currently the temporary parking, we would pick that up and we would move it to a more central area for two reasons. Really, we wanted to make sure we weren't losing any parking and hopefully gaining parking. But secondly, build an opportunity in the future for the downtown community that should structured parking or something bigger be available or needed, that there was enough land area there. Now, there's not enough land there today, but it's a much easier assembly and pretty well outlined in the library report that was done some time ago. And then once that, basically those are done, we would propose a 4-story, 78,000 square foot mixed use facility that encompasses about 6,000 square feet of commercial. We envision that. I'll talk about who the tenants that we see in that, and then about 80 residential units. As we look at the American Legion, it's been a really good collaboration. I will say I thought Nacho was going to throw me out of the room the first night I met him, but somehow he didn't do that. He probably wanted to. But you know, really, it's really an icon for our community. But it's also, if we call it what it is, it's a tired building that needs to, you know, have a new home for the Legion and really to honor what the vets have done. So we wanted to make sure we found the right solution. In that collaboration, we at least looked at, well, there's at least 6 different options that we presented to the Legion, probably 10 different options, everything from getting land donated out of town and building with construction costs. It not only disconnected them from the downtown area, but the costs were much higher than buying and renovating a building and keeping them in the downtown area. So a lot of valuation went into that process. So this is a rendering of that building. It's the old Chevrolet building. And you can see where the storefront used to be. We would envision those working with a design group and with a subcommittee, if you will, of the Legion, where that could come out onto the patio. And then as we look into the back, there's a couple of different spaces here that really meet the needs of what the Legion want. They need a place to gather, a place to have meetings, a place to socialize. There would also be areas to eat, drink, be merry, all that good stuff. But really bringing them into the core of the downtown instead of being on the periphery. One of the most interesting comments that I heard, and Robbie was there as well, when we were having conversations with a local business person, he said, you know, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I never think of hosting an event at the Legion. It's just not a place that I would go do that. If we were closer to the core, if it was renovated and upgraded, it's something that we think is a much needed space in the community and downtown as well. So we're excited about the opportunity to you know, bring a renovated project here. Probably the biggest issue that I just want to hit head on is how we're dealing with parking in downtown. One of the original RFP pieces was a collaborative parking solution. So interesting selection of photos here to put a semi next to a parking garage next to an old area here. But this is basically the DDA block. And the reason that I wanted to bring it to attention, you know, we've had community meetings with both individuals, business owners, open houses. We're getting ready to meet again with this the 400 block group once we get through this phase. But this is temporarily parking, even though it's not owned by these businesses, that it's an important part of what they do. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to not only move that, but then also had the ability to make sure that their business was there. So the things that we really looked at is to protect the total inventory and make sure that it was either equal to or a net gain. Secondly was, and probably more importantly, was the access and mobility. So the reason I put this up here, this is an 8 foot wide, basically a semi is 8 foot wide. This right here is a depiction of that same size vehicle. So this is a 20-foot alley, and what we have here in some cases is anywhere from 28 to 35 feet. So when we look at this, we have about 30 to 40% more room to do that. This is in downtown Fort Collins. It's an area that considered making traffic and mobility and movement one direction. In the end, they didn't do that. It operates fine. We've got a lot of photos there. So we presented this as well to the business owners there. But it basically picks up this parking inventory and moves it over here to the Birch Block. This is a depiction of what that would be. So I think this represents 110 spaces, which is a net gain. There's some things that we have to do in terms of circulation and proximity. This has not been approved. It's been reviewed, but not been formally approved through the planning department. But there's, depending on if we go angled parking, it drops down to like closer to 90 spaces. If we did this, it's above 100. So that needs to be vetted out pretty quickly. So as we look to really the future, we always try, especially in a downtown, is how do we honor the past? And I think when we look at the Legion, when we look at some of the important things, we want to honor the past as we go through design. So we went back to really step back and say, what are some of the historic photos? So top left there, you can see the factory. Bottom right is, you see another one in Sterling. But these facilities really represent a lot of the history of what occurred in our downtown, what occurred right on the rail. The rail is so important to the honoring the past, but it's still very important and becoming very important. So we wanted to make sure we weren't putting a glass tent up next to something that doesn't make sense. So as we went through that process, this is a depiction of what we would see sitting on the block that currently has the Legion block. So it honors the history of the past. Architecture, we want to blend, the history of where it's been, but also today's values. And most importantly, what I think could be a concern when we look at tax increment, when we look at not tax increment, but tax generation, is if it's all residential, that doesn't help, the Downtown Development Authority and the town. If it's all commercial, quite frankly, there's not a big enough market for that right now. And so the balance of that is really a critical component. So what we see here on this next slide is really a depiction here where the current Legion sits right here. And this option, basically, listening to the DDA board and town board members, this on Ash Street would essentially be all commercial. So these would be restaurants, be patios, especially here on the end cap. Somewhere in here we would put an amenity space, a fitness center of some kind that would be used for tenants of the building. And then another thing we heard really strongly was the opportunity for live-work units so that we can grow from another residential opportunity into a commercial use. That takes some time, and we've done that before. It's not rocket science, but when we look at construction costs and things like that, when you do, let's say we did 6 live-work units, you have 6 different water taps. If it was all 6 residential apartment buildings, it's 1 water tap for the whole building. So there's an increased cost in that, and so we're evaluating that. But this, what I'll show you here is a plan that has live-work on the 7th Street side, and then it has the commercial side on Ash. The other part that we found is in this area, because of the kind of funkiness of this lot, we see an opportunity to do another commercial building in that location. So still to be defined. Of course, the architects always put fun stuff in here that is almost impossible to afford, like water towers that are really cool features that you try to figure out how to pay for. But it does depict really the history of where we've been. So this shows a little bit more. This is just the ground level. So you got live-work units on this side, you've got retail here, and then this future commercial pad. Really important to note is that in looking at the parking code and really wanting to develop something that doesn't require a variance, this is what we call the whole thing will self-park. So everything that's needed for this site is provided on the site. And I can give more detail on that if we need to discuss that. So, what does this want to look like and who are the retailers? So these are 8 or 10 different groups that we've done leases with in the last 4 to 5 years in Fort Collins. We've done them in Loveland. We've done them in Arvada. But these are the kind of groups that we would immediately target. There's a whole other list of target areas. What I didn't want to do is come here and put a bunch of logos up there with people that we didn't ever do a deal with. So these are people that we've done a deal with within the last few years downtown Fort Collins, Harmony Road, Fort Collins, downtown Loveland, as well as downtown Arvada. So a couple of examples of that mixed use. So this is Max Flats, which is at Mulberry and Mason Street in Fort Collins and downtown. This shows on the right here, this is a 5-story project. The one we're proposing is 4 stories. But then you've got coffee shop on the corner, and then retail here. Another project that we did this is in downtown Loveland, is called Gallery Flats. So this is 66 units. Again, this is shown as 5 stories. These are the live-work units that started as 6 residential units. And I should have verified, but I think 4 of the 6 have now converted to commercial use. There's 2 that are still being used as residential uses. I want to get on to really our latest project, which we've delivered in the last 30 days in some parts and over about 6 months ago. So Patina Flats at the Foundry. This is a 3.5 city block redevelopment in downtown Loveland. It's about an $80 million project, 2 5-story buildings, but again, vertical mixed use, ground level commercial. I think it's really important to hit home that this is a mixed use vertical project. It's not just a residential project. It will drive the property tax, it'll drive for the commercial side as well as the residential. This is actually what we call kind of our brownstone walk-up. So these are all studio units on 287. Ironically, they were the first products to go. We knew it was going to be either the best idea or the worst idea we'd had. But I would envision a design sort of like that, or like the Gallery Flats for that live-work component. Also wanted to show, some of the streetscape brick pavers that lead between the buildings and the Marriott Hotel that will open here in about 3 months. And then these are some of the interiors. Everything that we do in our mixed-use projects in the multifamily space, everything's always hard surface. So there's no linoleum from the old days. Everything is stainless steel. And everything is either, we won't do true hardwood, but it'll be a hardwood look tile finish. And then the color schemes will adjust to there. But those are minimum standards for everything that we do, and it would be what we would do in this project as well. Looking quickly at the commercial options, I've talked through these, but the commercial on this one, it basically puts live, work, and retail here. We could also just do all residential here, move retail around. What I showed you was live, work, retail, and then another retail option. The downside of that is doing a standalone second building is very expensive right now, but it still may make sense. So I'll give you a perspective. A recent project we did on Harmony right by the Banner Hospital, it cost over $400 a square foot to deliver that project. So what does that really mean? It means that the rents have to be somewhere in the $28 to $30 a square foot range just to get a 10% return on your project. So when we look at downtown, the Foundry project I just showed you in Loveland, we're marketing that at $19 to $20 a square foot, and it's still been a challenge to lease that up. I think Windsor is probably $1 or $2 below that, but about that same range. But your construction costs don't really warrant that. So that's going to be the challenge that we'll continue to navigate. But I do think that this option B is most likely the current focus of what we're looking at. So that's phase 1, and we would anticipate really as soon as we can get things moving with the Legion and get renovated and get them into a new home, we would at the same time, once we get started on really hardcore design on this, which would be about a 4-month process, we would immediately start back in on the DDA block. But again, the timing issue for us is the requirement to close on that 4th Street property. So, whoops, I've turned it here, but I didn't let you guys see what I'm talking about. So phase 2, we'll start that, in the next couple of months in terms of the planning phases. We really see 2 different commercial hubs. So red is identified as commercial, white is identified as residential. We picture this as a 2-story for sale product. a for-sale condo product, which we think is a great market for the Windsor area as well. When we look at this alley, there's a lot we can do, and it's all about money, right? You can do lots of different things, but this is across from the Rio in downtown Fort Collins, an alley that was redone by the DDA there. We hired the same architect and planner that did that, as well as this is also what we envision. Again, there'll be a lot of truck traffic. Deliveries are critically important, but we also have the opportunity to create a really nice environment with flowers and other landscape areas. So when we look at the original proposal that was in the RFP about 18, 19 months, these were the things that were identified as options. Land and property tax increment, facade improvement program, town fee waivers, and a streamlined approval process. And so we really have married that. We really are just trying to respond to what was asked. And so those details are all in the term sheet that was provided to both boards over the last week or 10 days. The financial goals would be, I mentioned even in the interview way back, is if we were to try to do a project where we create $1 of new tax revenue and ask for $1 or ask for 90 cents of it, it doesn't allow the town or doesn't allow the DDA to go do the next project. So what we've really moved to is really looking to share that taxes. And in our proposal, originally that was basically what we had assumed. So the things that we heard from both the DDA and the town board reps that were in the meetings were, make sure that when you're doing that ask, also put a cap on it. So if we're wildly successful, once we hit that number, if it's in year 4, if it's in year 24, that once that's done, once you get to that point, it's done. So we've got a property tax piece, you've got a sales tax piece here. Each of those have a cap, and then an amount equal to 50% of the sales tax increment on the 4th Street property. So picture that property right now. It's really an industrial building. It's producing some property tax, but no sales tax. Picture it now with the new Legion, where there's transactions happening on the food and beverage side. Part of the discussions we've had with the Legion from the very beginning is to get them as close to net neutral as we can. And so that's what we're still working on. Construction costs are high. We went through that with them last week, but we're still working to get to a point where they can move to a new location and not end up, having a big payment. So that's where this requirement really comes into play, is the amount of money that we'll pick up the money from the Legion purchase, put that into the new Legion acquisition, and then go through and do the renovation of that, and then there'll be a part of that new building that they can either rent or we could condo it out, a couple of different options there. But they are assumed to create sales tax increment, and our model assumes they will need to have at least 50% of that coming back. But again, this is in a property that's not producing any sales tax today. So every dollar that is a new dollar is a positive. And then the other terms here, we've talked about, we're going to have to do the abatement and demolition of the Legion, and these are all outlined in the term sheet that you guys, I think, will discuss afterward. Permitted parking, this basically, we're parking it at a higher level than this, and then wanting to be involved in the facade improvement program. So this was I've got 2 more slides. This is an interesting diagram. So when you look at the assessed value currently of the DDA, it's about $5.3 million. And when you look at the assessed value, and this is sort of in the what's in it for the town, what's in it for the DDA, this doesn't show up very well, but it's about $1.3 million will be the new assessed valuation coming into the DDA from this first phase, not both phases, just the first phase. So when you do the math of where you are today and you add this, it basically increases the DDA assessed valuation by 28%. It's a huge increase in terms of, if you do that project, this does not include the mill. So when the mill comes online, when this comes online, you're really starting to get to a point where the DDA becomes more self-sufficient, which I know is the goal, both of the DDA and the town. So last, I'll just say, you know, 4 things we see. One of the biggest, I wasn't sure if square footage this was bigger than the mill. I'd like to say it was, but I didn't have time to verify, so I didn't want to say that. But it's certainly one of the biggest. We've talked about sales tax, property tax, and the job growth. You know, the job growth is one I'm awful careful about talking about. If we were talking about $80,000 a year engineering jobs, I would be pounding that drum really hard. These will be predominantly service and managerial positions, but the financial analysis that was done by an independent third party suggests there'll be about 20 new jobs that will be created in our market. So circling back to the original partnership goals of the RFP, I won't read them to you, but we think that we've hit all of these, and we think we're very much in line with what the original proposal, which we were selected on almost 18 months ago. So with that, I'm open for questions, or you guys can take your seats back up there. What do you tell me?
I have a question.
Yes.
On your option B, where you have the additional side building, does that increase your commercial from the 6,000?
This year?
Yeah.
So
Or is that included in your
it's-
initial 6,000?
So this whole project is assumed to be 6,000 somehow. So it'll either be this building plus part of this, or it'll be all of this. So it could be either of those. But it is not 6,000 plus another 4. And nor are any of the calculations that we provide.
I know that's not a part of your direct presentation here, but in talking about moving the Legion, the usable space that the Legion has right now, from the bar through the multi-use room that they have, what square footage is that they have now, and what square footage are we talking about them having at the new footprint?
Yeah, so I mean, the usable part is the operative word there, because there's stuff in the basement that's not as usable.
Right.
It's roughly 6,000, picking up to go to 6,000. So but we have a chance to really frame up the program the way that the Legion wants. The buildings, those two combined are 8,000 square feet. So there's a 2,000 square foot opportunity that we still need to work through. We can figure out a way where they can grow into it if they need to. It can be an asset where they actually lease it, and that revenue comes into the financial model. We could take that and create 2 condos, one that is owned by the Legion, one that's owned by Johnny Beyer for another 2,000 feet. So there's still some optionality there, but it's basically a little over 8,000 feet, and we anticipate 6,000 need for the Legion.
Jay, I know you have been focused on Legion parcel because of timing and all the stuff going on, but I would like to go more and talk about the back lots and just, do you have any specific retail in mind? I mean, give us a little bit more detail on the Legion side, but I just wonder really what are you thinking there? How many what's the square footage of that commercial? What's the timing of that? Like what
Yeah.
do we,
Sure,
what do we know?
Let me just try to answer it without going all the way back. So the way that I see it, I think on the far eastern edge, we're basically looking across Main Street to the Hearth, incredibly successful project, right behind the Chimney Park, and some of those other restaurants, very successful piece there. Definitely that eastern edge is kind of a marquee restaurant with patios, that type of thing. How we actually go about designing it, I didn't put it in here, but we've recently delivered a project also in downtown Fort Collins called The Exchange, and the whole thing was done out of shipping containers. And so we've got 200 to 400 square foot small operators in there, everything from small little donut shop to a coffee shop to a flower shop, tacos and tequila. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things. So it could be something like that, but I think it wants to be something that draws you across the street, because we got the mill, you've got Hearth, you've got that. So I think that definitely, that eastern edge is a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot use that is in the restaurant not like soft good retail, not like a clothing store, but something that's very active, that pulls you across the street. As we move to the western edge, if we're walking through that, so we walk past that, and then we envision some for sale condos, and we get to Fifth Street, we envision that it'll either be some of the same, or it could be what I call destination commercial. So I would put destination commercial. We want the commercial for the property tax base. If it's a restaurant, you get property and sales. A destination commercial to me could be anything from fitness. It could be, and it's really a demand analysis of what we need. It could also be office or some kind of a smaller attorneys group or something like that. So what we don't want to do is, and we're facing this a little bit in Loveland, is we don't want to have businesses that turn their lights off at 5 o'clock. If we're trying to activate that streetscape and connect it to the park, connect it to the events that happen there. So I would say that it's going to be a mix, but certainly our goal would be for the activation of that to make those really in the restaurant space.
And have you considered or discussed, I saw in Loveland you had a nice hotel that's being turned out. Has that been a consideration?
A hotel?
Hotel or?
We looked at it very quickly, but I can't say that we spent a lot of time on it. The biggest issue we'll run into on any of these things is parking. So the thing we did, and we got some pretty strong community feedback, if we had that whole area as residential, the market would take it like that. So it'd be good for us as a developer, but it doesn't help the DDA as much. When I look at a hotel, anything when you drive too much commercial, you're driving the parking situation the other direction. The residential will all park underneath, so those again, they park themselves, all the residential in both phases. But we didn't spend a whole lot of time, Shane, on the hotel. The only site that would really be big enough to make that work would be the current Legion site, if the market was there. But we didn't study that.
And then, it's not really posted tonight, but we can probably all assume that, as we talked about development in the back lots, where it's gonna be TIF, property sales, and look for fee waivers, and there's gonna be a similar request, right, that we have the Legion parcel.
For the DDA block?
Yes.
Yeah, I would see that the agreements would probably, as you're having your discussion, they should be mirroring the assumptions, especially with the cost of construction on that side.
If I understand this correctly, you're going to buy the new Legion building, is that correct?
We're going to be the proud owners of an old one and a new one
Okay.
within a short window of time.
But the DDA in town are going to pay for the renovations, is that the?
So we have it under contract, but the way the term sheet reads goes all the way back to our proposal almost 2 years ago, where the money that is actually acquiring it, we're doing it mechanically, but that's split between, I think it's split, right, Matt, between the DDA and the town. That's the discussion.
25, I think
That's the discussion.
The ask is 550, I think, right? The total ask. It would have to be 550, so.
And the value of the 550 came from an appraisal that was done. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure I did,
Well,
based on your.
yes, you did, but the town and the DDA basically are picking up the improvements in the property, correct?
They're basically buying it and then the demolition to deliver that clean site that we will then develop.
The new developed site is basically be paid for partly with the sales tax increment, so that's built to go back in, so the kind of, I think, the delta to remodel that building, we're gonna have revenues that come in, but I think that it's also envisioned that there'd be 50% sales tax increment that would get pushed back into that development debt, right? That's kind of how the remodel happens.
Okay, and the 0.7 parking spaces per bedroom, what that is?
Yeah, so typically, in most urban environments around here, Windsor is different. We typically do 0.7 per bed or 1 per unit. But that's really in a more multimodal downtown, which this is really not. There's not great bus transportation and those kind of things. So if we want to get into the deeper nuggets of that, I can show you exactly what this project I just showed you delivers in terms of parking, if you want to see what the numbers are compared to what's out there now. Do you want me to show you that? Yes. Let me see if I can. So I don't know if it's going to go any faster. Got a couple other slides here. So it's a little bit hard to read, but this was basically done taking the current codes, taking the number of beds, number of units. We're positioning this as 80 units. This model shows 90, so we think we can park up to 90. So these are your requirements. So the proposed plan basically is required to provide 119. In the off-street, meaning on-site to the project, is 122, so it's a little more than that, and then that doesn't include the on-street. So when you add what we would build in plus the on-street, it's about, goes from 119 to 150 compared to where we are today.
And there'd be enough spaces for the residents plus the commercial gas land as well?
Yeah, that's what this is identifying here in this area. So each studio or one bedroom is going to have at least one parking spot. A two bedroom is going to have two. And then the retail, this is the requirement that's in the code today. And then this is actually would be delivered. So I think what you should assume is that interior to that block, all that residential will park there, and there will be some that will be available for commercial. And then the on-street will be available for the commercial and the live-work units. So when you add all those together, you get to that 150.
Are you planning street improvements there at the intersection, 7th and Ash?
We haven't gotten that far yet in terms of exactly what's happening on that intersection. I'm sure there will be some that will be required.
As far as parking with New Legion, is there going to be adequate parking for
Yeah, so
receptions and parties?
Yeah, so what we did, and the DDA actually did this. So this is the old Legion here. So there was an analysis done that said, okay, how many parking spaces are generally in that area, regardless of who owns them, public, private, the town, DDA. And you're at about 134. And so this circle is showing a 5-minute walk. When you go to the new location here, you take that same 5-minute walk. We're here at Town Hall, and when you add these together, I should have done the math, it's about 305. So we go from the current spaces of, say, 210 to 305. They're dispersed differently for sure. Some are on street, public parking, some are private. The DDA is working on an after 5 program in this back area here, where a small fee is paid to the property owners here, where they can basically use those in private. So that was probably the single biggest issue then in terms of that location is not only how many are there, where they are, and understanding the demographic of a lot of the folks that are coming there are not all able-bodied folks. So we wanted to study that and make sure that we understood, within a 5-minute walk, how those vary.
So, the live-work units that you've got kind of on the north-south side, was that because you feel there's a market for that particular kind of asset, or are you going to build it in both areas, or?
Well, the whole idea behind live work is the fact that you are assuming there is not a commercial demand today, but you believe that there will be in time. And so from a developer, from an owner perspective, you're going into it assuming it stays residential, but you convert them as you go, and then frankly, it's better for us too, because we can charge more rent for commercial, and it creates a lot more taxes for the ZBA. So very much like we did at Loveland when we delivered that project in 2000, we did 6 there, but they're right on 287. That's why we went to 257 out on 7th Street. You can do some signage, some exposure there. If you picture a small insurance office, or pick the smaller home office type users. I think there'll probably be some market for it, but I think it'll take 5 or 6 years to grow into it.
So those units would be that whole side of the building, street level and up?
No, just the ground level, and then level 2, 3, and 4 will be residential. So it'll be a taller, ground floor will always be taller, the interior height, and then when you go to 2, 3, and 4, that's more traditional. But we never do anything with less than 9-foot ceilings inside the units, even at the lowest drop point of the soffit. We've all lived in those places where there's an 8-foot ceiling, there's a soffit, it's 2 feet in your head on it. So we won't do that. It's just not good for the customer experience.
When the project is totally finished, what do you envision, two parts there, what do you envision the total square footage being? And I'm correct in hearing you say that retail would be somewhere between 6,000 and 11,000 square feet?
Well, let's just go through it. So on this one, this program right here is 78,000 square feet, and you've got, this is shown as 80 residential units and 6,000 square feet of commercial, retail, restaurant. And then when we go to this block, this is shown as 24 for-sale condos, anywhere from 1,200 square feet to 1,600 square feet on the second floor. This is shown as 4,000 square feet. This is shown as 6,000. So this is showing 10,000 square feet of commercial and 24 residential units. And then the other one is 80 and 6.
So 16.
So we got 80 plus 24, you got 104 residential units. You got about 16,000 square feet of commercial.
Like a retail or like an office.
Yeah, but it'd be a commercial use. And then you've got, we'll average about 1,160 square feet for each live-work unit. So if those all convert to commercial, that'll be another just shy of 7,000 feet of commercial. But I think it'll take a little time to do that.
Only because you just said, describing the 2 white blocks, I think you said it would be residential. Second, third floor, or?
So those are shown as 2-story. So if I lived here, I would drive in here, and then I would have a garage that goes in half of the distance. And then, so these are basically, this is the garage access points here. And then the front half of this, your front door is actually, we wanted to put that toward the lake, toward the property or the amenities. And then the whole second floor of both of these buildings would also be residential. So you'd have kind of half of the floor at grade or on the first floor, and then the whole second floor above the garage.
Jay, I've got a question. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but looking through table 15, so when you actually kind of go through and look at the financial impacts to the community, and you already have this memorized, I'm sure, but I'll remind you, table 15 is the Windsor Boardwalk Backlot Development Town Public Works Parcel, and it's like the annual recurring economic impact. I want to be sure, is this calculation done for all the spending they would do, or are you saying the town, it says housing spending for Weld County, but there's just, I'm just trying to, it's this thing here, so is this just?
That's the impact. That's all the new.
Right, but you're saying countywide impact, or you're saying the town of Windsor?
Oh, no, that's just not.
Because there's just a lot of retail things we don't have, we don't have big boxes, we don't have, there's just inputs here that we just don't have. We don't have sales tax from automobiles, we don't have, I don't think, so I'm looking at this, I'm like, is this a countywide thing? We don't have big boxes.
So it's, I get it. I have.
Okay.
Should be able to answer that. But it's really the economic impact of any of those categories. So it must be a countywide calculation when they import into Vermont. This is not generating
So it is, it's the entire county, it's not just for
It's
now.
not,
Okay, okay, all right.
Other questions?
This might be a DDA question, but what's the future of the parcel across from that old mill? One that goes all the way to the railroad?
That's the point.
Pointy area? Yeah.
Over here or over this way?
No, the self-standing restaurant spot to the right.
Oh, this right here?
Corner part, that is DDA law.
Yeah, the DDA lot goes all the way to the edge here. Is that what you're asking? Yeah, so this is the part that I was talking about with Hearth being here, that we would envision this being, you know, a restaurant or two restaurants on a
That's
commercial.
east of 4th Street.
Yes. Yeah, 4th Street is right here,
Okay.
and the mill is, you can just barely see right here.
So basically, that parcel is, that's included in one parcel.
Well, yeah, this whole thing is now one parcel.
Okay, now, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? That's it?
So this is the opportunity, if you have questions for Jay, because then the boards are gonna break into an executive session for further deliberation. And then anybody who's not part of the town or the DDA board will be excused to leave. So if you have questions, now would be the time, right?
And I'm sorry, I don't want to ask too many, but could you explain just, because you talked about the residential side and how you feel like the market would absorb that? And so what I'm trying to just wrap my head around for this next discussion is, so the request is to waive all the fees, everything goes into that. Deliver a clean site, it's ready to develop, there's no fees. And then also with the tax increments. And I'm just not sure if we all know the residential properties go on hotcakes here, so I'm just not sure, like, what do we need the incentives in the project, what does that make it work? Whereas without it, why do we need to waive the fees, where without it, would it work? Just so we can just kind of contextually understand why you built it in here.
Yeah, well, to answer the question, when we, and I spent some time, would love to spin you through our model, our financial model. Anytime we go and do what we call public-private partnership, we're open book. And when we presented our proposal at the beginning, we said we will move forward with the project as long as we have a 10% cash-on-cash return and a 15% internal rate of return. Now, we'll get into the details of exactly what that means. But it basically means if I'm investing $1, I want 10 cents back on it every year. It's a 10% return. That's not a huge return for some of the risk that you're taking. So what we end up doing is we do a gap analysis and we back into what is needed to reach that threshold. So I went through that with Matt saying, look, if we don't get fees waived, that 10% goes to 9, goes to 8. If we have to pay for land, it goes to 10 and 9, 8. And we won't do the project less than 10. And we did the same thing with the Foundry, and we agreed to audits, we agreed to different things, we gave them our model. I just think it's, having lived in the public sector, for 13 years, I know the color of money, they're different, and so we need to be able to share that with people. And, because I think there's a misperception sometimes of that. So, I don't know if that answers your question very well, but the residential side, we believe, we got our market, we paid $10,000 to do our market study to say what would happen with this inventory in this location in Windsor. And the rents were just 3 or 4% less than Fort Collins and Arlington. And so we imported those into our model, which actually reduced some of the need to get to that 10% return.
So the residential's, at least on the Legion side, is the vast majority. So is all the TIF and is all the increment money just the commercial, the 6,000 square feet?
Well, as you know, in Colorado, the taxes created for commercial are 4 times what they are for residential. tax revenue per square foot for commercial is much, much higher than the residential side. The market opportunity is on the residential side. I'm still concerned about having 16,000 square feet commercial. But I've got 16,000 in downtown Loveland that has not been easy in a $75 million project with a brand new movie theater and hotel. So I'm not trying to scare, any of us away, because what we would typically do is, in a reimbursement agreement, if we don't create the tax, we don't get any back, right? That's the risk that we take.
Jay, I think maybe a follow-up question, are the construction costs on the residential in a mixed-use building different than, say, a greenfield apartment building? How does that stack up in terms of this type of a project or this type of a location in comparison with, some of the stuff that's going on outside of town?
That's a good question. I mean, the cost of a 2x4 is the same whether you build a greenfield or redevelopment. The cost of, the hard cost of construction is a little bit more when you're going vertical. One of the, I showed you a lot of 5-story products, which, to bore you for 1 second, you can only build 4 stories of wood on top of a concrete. So we always do, we'll do the ground level commercial, pour a bit, the roof of that commercial is a huge concrete pad, and then we go up 4, so that gets you to 5. This is shown more like you would see a hotel being built, 4-story hotel, where it's basically all what I would call stick built. So the benefit of that is you don't have as much concrete, you don't have as much steel in the project. So, but this project will be, the resident, or the apartment units will be just short of $200,000 a unit to build. And then the core and shell is, I think, the commercial is $190 a foot, and then you've got to put tenant improvements inside of that. So you'll be at $300 a foot pretty easy on the commercial side. So, yeah, I mean, the rents barely get you to the point, construction costs continue to do what they do and labor costs do, rents are not going to continue to go with it. So my fear is the opportunity, we're doing less and less deals right now because of how expensive everything is to build. Questions?
Any final questions? Did the American, I know we have a lot of presence from the American Legion tonight. Did you guys want to make any statements at all? Or say anything?
Yeah, I can real quick.
Okay, you want to come forward, Robbie?
My name is Robbie Doman. I'm the commander of the local American Legion. I've only been around the commander there about 8 years. The Legion itself, though, has been part of our community about 70 plus years. A lot of great things go on in there, and I'd like to thank the help from the town of Windsor and Brinkman and the DDA on this whole process. It's been going on about 2 years when we got the discussions going on things that could happen. And we are in a building that isn't set to last for future veterans that are becoming home to Windsor, that they call home, and they want to have a place that they can feel welcome and come to for help with their benefits or struggling with bills when they first get out of service and things of that sort. And that's what we're here for, is to help local veterans. We do more in the county as well. We really push to help local veterans in the immediate area in Windsor, so we have that direct impact. But it's not really just a veteran organization when you look at it from an outside point, because we are one of the only legions in Colorado that's open to the public. So if you look in every other smaller town around us, or a private thing, you show an ID, you get in. Our post, we like to welcome community members and do school events. We rent the hall for weddings, birthdays, dances, all sorts of things. But any school event that comes in, we give it to them free of cost so they can hold their functions in there. And what we have now is getting by and making it happen for the community. But there is, the obvious thing in the building is from 1942, an old POW officers' quarters from Greeley. So it is an older structure and a lot of updates need to happen. We do appreciate the opportunity that's coming to get us into this new facility. It's been great working through these and things that can come and make it a real focal point for right in the downtown area that the whole community will see that veteran stance that Windsor has, and what we're gonna have out front, it's all in the architectural design, but definitely those giant flagpoles that'll be shooting out the top right downtown, and honor roll of veterans we've lost and things of that sort. But it's just great to have the opportunity to get to a new facility at and having the community and the DDA and all these different types of revenue help to make that happen. It's just great to have that help to show that Windsor really wants to have a place for their veterans to call home in the future, and it just make them feel welcome. And a lot of people look at it like it's a bar that everybody goes to hang out, but there's a lot more that goes on that we really strive to help in our community and both sides of it, veteran and not. So, but thank you for everything you guys have been doing. There's been a lot of time put into it, I know, from a lot of organizations. So there's still a little ways to go on how this funding and everything's going to work, but it's going to be pretty cool to have that opportunity for these veterans coming home now. So thank you.
Any final questions? Are we to this point?
We'll need to call our meeting to order.
I've got a piece of paper that's gonna do that.
You want to go first, Josh?
The call to order?
Oh, yeah,
We might as well at least just start our meeting, and
Yes,
then you
you
can start on your end.
why don't you call them to order, because mine's gonna call all of us into the
Sure.
executive session.
Yep, so we'll do, Dan, if you want to do call to order and roll call.
Okay, I'd like to call our meeting to order. Matt, you are called first.
Dan Staps? Here. Brent Petty?
Here.
Dan Brock?
Here.
Dean Kaler? Mr. Terry Alford.
And then, Madam Mayor will take over.
Okay. So with that, the DDA Board of Directors is convening an executive session for this same purpose this evening. The two boards will convene their executive sessions jointly to discuss their financial participation in the Brinkman redevelopment plan. This joint executive session is being convened to assure efficiency, consistency, and clarity in instructions to each board negotiators. This joint executive session reflects the statutory interrelationship of the town and the DDA with respect to carrying out the respective plans for the downtown area in Windsor. So it is February 13th, and the time is 7 p.m. Is that the one I'm supposed to be reading? No, well, we need to go into executive session first. Okay. Is there a motion to move into executive session? Do we need to do that from each board?
Yes.
Okay, so first from town board. Okay, I see a motion from Mr. Kozlowski and a second from Mr. Bennett approving to move into executive session.
And just to clarify, the purpose is to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect to the Brinkman redevelopment proposal. With that
Okay.
clarification, you're good to go.
Okay, and we have a motion on the floor. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed? Town of Windsor Board will move into executive session.
I'd like to entertain a motion for the DDA to go into executive session.
So I have a motion that we enter executive session for the purposes stated by the chairman.
Can you go ahead and read that?
For the purpose to determine positions relative